Today we're going to dismantle this shower stall that has already been demoed to get rid of the fiberglass shower enclosure that was in here. There's a 6-inch lug wall here inside of a 5'6" bathroom, so it would fit a standard fiberglass shower enclosure or tub slash shower enclosure. So I'm going to remove this wall right here. I call it a lug wall, and remove it and salvage the framing, because it's nice and seasoned. It's particular to the house with its humidity and all, so it doesn't move after the fact, especially inside of a shower stall, because that's where usually tile will open up and joints will crack and stuff from the moving and shifting of the shower, of the framing materials behind the shower finishes. So I'm going to reuse this material here with a minimal amount of new material introduced to help reduce that possibility of shrinkage and cracks happening. So I've already determined where my cut lines are going to be based on what the tile man had requested for the sizes that we had talked about for maximizing the depth of the shower stall with the tile that's on hand. For using full tiles, the tile is 6 inches, so this will all be cased out so it's full tiles from left to right on the side walls. And there's going to be cuts on the sides because that's the nature of the beast. We're also going to introduce a niche in this dead space here. We can make it nice and deep. It's going to be about 6.5 inches deep back inside as a recess. I'm going to reduce some of the framing here. I'm going to take a 1/2 inch off of this so it's flush with this wall section right here. So that's going to be taken down to the point where it needs to, so that when I cut this chunk out right here, that way it'll be a smooth wall across here and a smooth wall across this framing on this other side over here. I'm going to begin by just scoring the drywall here so it makes a clean break, because it just so happens that layout on this side wound up perfectly with this side over here as well. So it's not that that was part of the equation, it just happened to work out that way. Thanks to the good Lord for that. So it makes things simple. And I marked this as high as I could comfortably reach here, so I'm just remarking the new cut. This was an anticipated cut here, but now we have actually a nice, hard, well-defined line. And I'm going to just mark the new one on the ceiling. I got that marked out. Now I can finish my cuts. Just so the drywall doesn't tear out crazy once I start pulling this off the wall. All right, I got a carbide tipped oscillating blade on this thing. I'm going to cut the nails so I can just literally lay the studs out of their place. Pretty much clean material coming out of here, except for the wayward nail. I nailed this by hand. They didn't use gun nails, so it's not loaded up crazy. Now demoing, dismantling, I'm okay with that. Nothing to it. That saves me a lot of trash. Usually as a rule, clench all my nails over so they don't wind up snagging somebody the wrong way, whether it's them putting them in the trash or taking them someplace. So it also actually saves some room in the trash can. Pretty easy. Okay, well, we've practically got a clean slate here. Now, eventually I'm going to pull down this one piece here after I recut this line here. There's blowing wool insulation. You can see it from laying elsewhere. If I pull that down in its entirety. I'm going to have a snowfall of fiberglass coming down. I ain't getting into that. I'm going to pull down a little piece at a time and shove fiberglass up in it to keep it in place while I pull down the next one, which will make vibration and make the rest of it fall down. It's been exposed. So pull down stuff, pull down another section, stuff, and until it's all done. And that way it keeps its R value. They don't have to have an insulator come back in. I found some other issues too, because that's the actual outside sheathing right there. Now there may be an overbuild on this roof to where it's not needed, but you know, I'm seeing the insulation for the ceiling over there, and I'm seeing fiberglass actually, I mean bats, so it might be a good thing up here in the ceiling. We'll see. Actually, I'm going to put that camera up in there right now. I'm seeing pink, so that's a good thing. If it's pink back there also, then maybe I'm doing okay. Let's see what happens. Alright, now we have a clean slate. And I have the material that I need to build that niche over here. Right, I'm going to run some of this trash down that I don't need up here, because you might be able to tell the room's at a premium in here. Seems like I do a lot of videos for rooms at a premium, so go figure. Anyway, I'm going to get the stuff down that I don't need, keep the stuff that I do need obviously, and yeah, get this niche started here with what it's required to get back. I'm going to take these tile guys marked here for its rough opening, and I'm going to just square those across. Not that I'm going to cut that one, but it's just going to give me a good definitive line to measure up 1.5 inches. I'll put that 2x6 that I have salvaged over here in its place. As a matter of fact, I can do this also. I'm going to see how this is. See how this has got a stud separating this plate? It's not even a plate, it's a block filler. For a fiberglass tub it worked obviously, but for a shower stall, the only thing that's keeping this from moving is this connection right in this area right here. Once I take this loose, anyway, I'm going to take this out up here, salvage the whole length of the stud as a matter of fact. So that means I got to transfer my marks over here where I have something to work with as a go by on this stud. So what's marked here, I'm going to put it over there and take it from there, because this stud's coming out completely, so I can cut it off to the places where I need to create the studs, that the cripples they call it, or the trimmers. No, trimmers is something else. But anyway, so I can cut out and make the cripples that I need for the length that is required for this niche here, for the top and for the bottom. So I'm going to transfer these marks from here and also down here as well to the stud over here. So I'll know where to cut this 1/2 inch out that I showed you earlier there, and this will get me to what I need for, boy, that wall's got a bow in it. Something's not right already. Well, it's going to be better when it's done. This is where you want to cut it. All right, so that's the top of my cut, and the stud is, the plate is above it. So now I'm going to measure up the 1.5 inches. Looks like I got to do some minor notching to get this into the surface here where it's beyond that, but that's also wanting to conform to that bow that I've seen in the that I've seen on the straight edge that I had up there, level I think it was. Piece of metal still in the way right there. Go. You can tell when your screws are grabbing good when the head sinks in. I'm only using 2.5 inch long screws. That gives me an inch of wood into the piece that I'm drawing to. You don't need to use 3-inch screws. It just makes you feel good, if anything, but 2-inch screws will work, especially when you see the heads sinking in up to 1/4 of an inch in depth. Now, when you're screwing these together, yes, it's good to get it drawn tight to the other. It's good to have all this making sure it's going to make a nice straight line. That's all fine and dandy, but the thing you want to do is get a toe screw from the corner at an angle so it connects it to this right here and the one on my at my head over here. So that's important because that'll keep these from moving independently, because right now these can still rock, move, you know, humidity changes, control, you know, humidity changes, really, that's what does it all. Especially in a shower stall where wood, you don't want wood to move where the corners of the tile is going to have. And that's how you get grout joints that open up and stuff. People, oh, my grout sheet. Well, if you fasten it well enough on the framing stage, you shouldn't really have that much of an issue. Next will be I'm going to cut this down and make this now this is a trimmer that I'm putting in. It's going to wind up finishing off with the face of the wall here, and I see I got a little bit of a discrepancy top to bottom, and but I'm going to put that stud back in. And I'm just going to mark it to the length by putting it in there, like so. Still have the slope at the top. It's not square, so I'm going to make it square. I'm going to run some screws through from the back side. Again, all this needs to be tied together. You would take it for granted that this framing member is all straight. Part of this wall here tied into this wall here for a closet on the other side. Well, it's not. When you look at this, you got an 1/8 of an inch gap over here. You look at that, 1/8 of an inch gap over there out of camera. But when you bridge the two, it's like this stud is leaning way the heck out. So straight edge across the top, mark the stud, and you can see I got about 1/4 of an inch I need to lose on this. So I'm going to take this stud back out, rip it down on my table saw, 1/4 of an inch down to, well, I could taper it all the way through because it's leaning out. It's flush at the bottom. I mean, it's doing good at the bottom. No, it's not. It's out. So I got to do something with this to make this work. So I'm going to dismount it, run it down, or maybe I just move it in. I'm going to do that instead. I'm going to relocate it so it's beside this stud, and I'll get some screws in there somehow to tie it all together. Three and 5/8, 3 and 9/16. I'm going to here approximately all the way up to there. I'm going to rip about 1/2 of an inch off this one piece that's sticking out bad. What I'm going to do is the sawzall, but that was going to take and do a lot of shake, rattling, and rolling. So I'm going to set this to near the depth that I need for a full thick cut. I don't need to go to full 2 1/4, 3 1/4, whatever it is. I'm going to set it 1 3/4 and make a plunge cut in here. Didn't do too good. Really only got one spot flush here. The rest of it's out. Well, it started good at the bottom, but it just went crazy at the top and at the bottom. So let's do that again. Seen something on Facebook. That ain't sawdust, that's man glitter. Yeah, this is long enough to do that right off the bat for the bottom plate. This is going to be a 2x4. Does really bode. Do something I'm sure these guys didn't do. See that gap there? That's how you get cracks in your tile. When that's there, you know what's going on. I better use a 2x4 there. Just so happens. I'm going to make a cut in this. It's going to look something like that on the end because I don't have a full 2x width on this edge over here. So I'm just going to eyeball some cuts. So I'm going to cut about 3/8, maybe a half on one side. About that 1.5 inches away. This edge of the fence is 1.5 inches from the edge of the blade. So all I gotta do is just guide that like that. Set myself at about 1 3/4 inches right there, and then eyeball about 1/4 inch down this edge here. And then pry out the difference. And there you have it. That should go right around this corner. It's a little shy, very nicely. But I'm a little short on my length too, so I gotta cut it off. And see, because this space right here is less than 1.5 inches, so I just simply can't put full size. I had to narrow it down. And what I'm going to do now is just simply put that in there and let that go around it and flush that up. As a matter of fact, I better get myself a square line reference. And I'm still sticking out a little bit right there, so I'm sticking out both. Again, that's right. This thing is bowed out this way, and I forgot about that, and it shows on the face of the stud. So I'm going to take another zip down here, about 1/8 of an inch. normally I like nailing this stuff when I'm working on a large amount of framing, and this really isn't a large amount. But when you're doing stuff like this, it's detailed, and 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch matter. It's nice to be able to pull a screw out instead of trying to draw nails out. So this is a big benefit of screwing things together when you're working in a situation like this. I left me notes here on this wall over here, and I need 6 5/8 from the face of frame to the back side of the niche. So I only got 5 inches of this. So that means I'm going to add another 2x layer behind it, and then the blocking to carry in the back of the niche. So I got a lot of layers going on there. And if I had the room, or if I knew I had the room, I would have boxed this out in plywood, because plywood's a lot more stable than dimensional lumber. And I could have just added a 2x2 perimeter around it, but I don't have that room, so I got to do it all in material, or 2x or dimensional material, and I got to make sure there's no movement in between all of it, so it keeps those cracks from happening. Now all my fancy stuff is done. All I got to do is just cut basic square pieces. I have this bottom piece tied in from stud over there to stud over here. So this has got a nice continuous straight line. There's no reason for it to buckle. So I'm not relying on this corner here anymore like the upper piece was done that I took out and rebuilt. So now we got nice, clean, hard straight lines that's going to stay over the long haul. And now I can add my simple cuts between that to finish out the dimensions. Next is to add the 1.5 to everything, and I think I'm going to use a piece of plywood on the back of this joint. Stick the plywood out about maybe 1.5 around the perimeter on the inside. So you can just put a piece of Durarock right up against it and go with that. So you just make sure it's 6 5/8 deep. From front of framing to the front of plywood in the back of the width, 19 inches. Back of the width, 19 inches. So I have 20, and I got 19.5, so I got better. Tall man can bring that down to size real easy. So I'm going to stick with these right here. I'm not going to try to fine tune and see where his centering is going to be at for his tile. So I'm going to let him fine tune that last 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, depending on how you look at it. Because the niche is going to be 18 by 18, 3 6x6 tile in each way. And by the time you get your Durarock and your thin set and the thickness of tile, it adds up to about, it'll take 20 inches away in a heartbeat, or even 19. So I just need to come up with the 1 5/16 pieces here and there. All right, that material is not the straightest, but by the time I cut it in short pieces, it won't matter. All I need now is a piece of plywood to put on the back side of this, and this will have this niche done. thing I gotta go on. That niche is done. I think it's what the tile guy is looking for, plus some as well. But I'm gonna start on getting this ceiling finished framed up to where that clip can carry on across. It looks like it's got about 2-foot centers up there following the trusses. And it almost looks like it really needs more, but that would mean putting a flat one up there to carry that. And that might be the thing to do. This one's down compared to the rest of them. The 2 nails, as big as they are, will still give a little. Just like that. And if I got it up high enough for it to be level where it intersects with the wall. Nope, you still got to go up higher still. Not by much though. Now I'm going to use some screws to keep it. Now I can draw a line the rest of the way across, because now I have a reference point that's accurate. I'm going to put one over here too, because I'm going to break this down to a smaller span. But now I can take that block that came out and just move it over the rest of the way. The tile guy's going to look for his uniformity in this size so he doesn't have to taper cut all of his tile going across the way. So I want to make sure that that intersecting point is consistent. There's no way to get this connected with that duct in the way, so I'm going to run some 4-inch screws, and hopefully with a 3-inch here, I can get at least an inch tap into the end of that plate. We'll see. Excellent. It took and it drew and it sunk in about 1/2 of an inch in the head, so I got a good grab. I sunk that tip up that far, a good 3/4 of an inch, so that's got great grab. All right, that's done. I better confirm that it's not too low. In these cases, it's too high is good. In the middle, if it's too low, it'll put a belly that you can't get rid of. And it's high by about a 1/16. Because then that could be floated in the thin set for that. But you can't thin the thin set. You cannot thin the thin set down so much to where you're going to get rid of a bow. Unless you float the ends out, and that's really a lot more difficult than trying to float the middle out. All right, when I cut this drywall back, there was a 2x4 that was sneaking out behind it that was serving as backer beforehand for the shower stall that was here. Well, needless to say, when it grows, the backer didn't serve its purpose anymore, so I pulled it. The tall guys are asking for a 2x6 to go back in here in its place. So this has been cut to its new dimension based on what the tall guy needs. And I'm going to put a 2x6 in here. And the way this is notched up here, they didn't even have that 2x4 nailed into that notch, or anyway, so it wouldn't even stabilize in its length. I'm going to stabilize it down here some midpoints where I can reach in behind here and run a screw into the stud back in that corner there, at least Lord willing I can, and get something to stabilize this thing up against the stud with a 2x4 set back 1.5 inches traveling across the way. It'll have to be down here because there's this pipe making a vertical rise right here, so it'll have to be down here. But it beats the crap out of what was there, which was nothing. All right, so let's get that one. So I got my 14 5/8 number that I measured from this stud back into the pocket where the next stud is. And I added a block of plywood, which has an 1.5 inch overhang. So that way now I can measure from the end of this plywood down to 14 5/8 and get that cut. What that's going to do is let me get a couple of screws started into the face of this, and I'll push this one in there and then run those screws into the neighboring stud. Alright, got my 2 screws in there, so let's get this ran back in this cavity. Might have to back this edge off because that's really a wide piece of wood going back in there. So if I taper this off just a little bit to help it slide by that stud, that'll be a big help. And in she goes, just like that. Now I'm going to take my same gauge stick that's a rip from a 2x4, 1.5 inches wide, and I'm going to mark that so I'll know where I want to put the face of this block. Now all I got to do is just hold this block this way so it stays tight to the back of the drywall, and I'll have my perfect 1.5 inch space to put my 2x4, 2x6 backer in here, and then that up there will catch the rest of it. I'm going to have to shim it because the width of the drill pushed the block back a little bit. If I had a real long tip, I could have done it, but I've got about 1/8 of an inch gap back there from the drywall where this was forcing that block away that little bit. So I can still remedy it because I'd rather have shim space than it being out too far, putting a belly in the piece. So now I'm ready to set my first 2x6 in here. And I'm going to run some drywalls. Well, let me get the bottom. Get the bottom tacked first before I start tacking this in place with some drywall screws. Matter of fact, I'm going to gauge that with a straight edge. That water line is like right in the way. It's out too far, so I'll just run that in some more. That's beautiful down there. I've got to draw this in just a little more. I got that gap behind there, because then I can fill it with a shim if I choose to, and keep this from misbehaving. And that's right up against that pipe. So hopefully that'll let me do what I need to do on the rest of it. That pipe's in the way. Barely see that pipe right here, and there's not a deep enough notch in there to get this pipe to shove back far enough. And I'm not even going to try to cut from behind it because I'm liable to cut the pipe. So I'm going to whittle the back of this down like I did that other piece for the niche, and cut about 1/4 inch out by about 2 inches so that that pipe can have some room to relax in that space. I should get that to go in beside that pipe now. Oh yeah. See, now I can move it back and forth if I need. That's the right thing to do. And there's going to finish off the top. Where this block here was notched out too deep, in order to stabilize that, I'm going to shove this shim in there and get that so it holds it out plain and keeps the drywall straight. So to get this in there. I can shove it in far enough to get this brought out and hopefully not buckle the drywall. And actually that's looking pretty good. I've got to get maybe a little bit more. Because see, I'm still feeling that, seeing it too, that drywall push. But my biggest thing, I don't want it to push out too far. All right, that's got it solid to the drywall. And it's got it straight. And the wall's not plumb. I'm gonna push it down a bit more. It's still looking good. But what I don't want to put a belly in this, but it's just really looking a lot better than what it did. I'm going to put a screw in there to keep that there. When the drywall was opened up on the ceiling, it was then found out that there was this large piece of ductwork that kept the blowing wool from actually getting over top of that portion of the bathroom ceiling. Fortunately for me, it did not have nothing to come cascading down. Also, fortunately for the homeowners, I was able to re-insulate that as just to make sure it was done properly, since there was so much insulation missing. Put a 2x block down here to give me my 1.5 inch space, and I just got that set on top of it. So now I can run my screws into the truss. All right, that's got two really solid, strong 2x in there, and now I'm going to be able to take this end and set this on that mark that I put right there. And now I have a nice 1.5 inch space right here between the drywall and the backer. So I can run my 2x6 or 2x4. It's going to be up here. Oh, but I got a freaking light right here. Ay, 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 ay. Maybe I can do something with that. Yeah. I can, these brackets here, you can see these in the camera. I can dismount these and run them back and reattach them to the side of the 2x6, so that'll work out. And they got pinch screws in there holding it, so yeah, that'll work. I don't know if you can see all this, but I had to break this off so it would go back to the, so this would go back to the proper side of the frame. So now it can extend back, and now my frame can go here and catch both the sheetrock here and then the other material that's going to go in. I'm hitting that pipe. There's a pipe down there on the other side that I had to notch the end to get that past that pipe. That's got this wrapped up. Short of the plumber getting in here and having to deal with the drain over here where it was a bathtub drain, getting it moved over to the center. I don't know if the tile guy's going to want to deal with the floor issue left over from the plumber doing what he's going to do. And I like videoing every single little nuance, because it might be something that you guys need to know about in what you're doing in your homes. Seeing what you've seen, hopefully you've picked up on something. I think it turned out well, and everything's in place that he needs to work with, hopefully more than what he's expecting, because he's planning on putting tile on the ceiling, which is really needs to be done a stringent, very stringent way on how that's actually fastened, at least especially the backer. And I got full backing rather than just something intermittent here. So anyway, that's the way it's done. Until later, y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.